Okay, continue where we left off last time. Last time we were learning the dinim, what's called kavish kamavoshel. Kavish kamavoshel means if it's completely covered, submerged, it's like the din of cooking. So if somebody has, let's say, in a cold meat pot or a brand new pot, it doesn't matter, you put in cold milk and you leave it there for 24 hours, it's like it was cooked in the pot. And therefore the pot becomes dairy. Therefore, what happens if somebody puts dairy milk into a meat pot, and so then, as we discussed it, unless if it was mamish cooked right away, but the milk is going to be good because the meat in the pot was more than 24 hours by the time this 24 hours finished. But the pot has to be kashered. Okay? Because the milk was in there for 24 hours, it's considered cooked. So now you have a meat pot, that milk was cooked into it. So even though the milk is kosher, but the bottom line is the pot is still not. Huh? It's what?
Doesn't turn into a bagam paste? The milk.
The milk, because the meat pot, let's say it was cooked a day ago, and then you put the milk in for 24 hours, so then the taste of in the pot is blemished. So the milk is kosher. But the pot needs to be koshered. And, okay, we learned there's any din. Now, what's another interesting din is like this. Remember if we learned at the beginning that if you cook milk and meat together, it's biblically forbidden. Forbidden to cook, to eat, and to benefit from. Right? The Torah says, we just read in last week's parsha, this past Shabbos, you're not allowed to cook a goat in its mother's milk. Meaning just cooking meat and milk together is biblically forbidden. So if somebody took a meat pot that was used within 24 hours and they intentionally cooked milk in that pot, because the taste of the meat is fresh, it comes into the milk, that's called biblically cooking meat and milk together. What happens though if somebody does that with kavush? In other words, they take milk and put it into a halachic pot, and it's there for 24 hours. That's not called biblical cooking meat and milk together. Because the definition of cooking milk and meat together, halacha says, is only when there's a fire, when there's heat. But the din of kavush, kamavoshel, in that respect, is not considered biblical that it's considered meat and milk together.
Does it have to be a goat?
What?
Does it have to be a goat?
No, any mother's milk. Any animal that has a mother who gives milk. That's why chicken, we learned, because there's no mother's milk, it's all eggs, so then it's only rabbinically forbidden, not biblically forbidden. Okay? Now, what happens if, and therefore because of this din is like this, kavush mixed into the pot is rabbinic. So now the question is like this, what happens if I don't know if it was there for 24 hours or not? It's a doubt. I don't know, was the milk in the pot for 24 hours? So because it's a rabbinic doubt in that case, because it's not meat and milk together, because the taste in the pot is more than 24 hours anyway, so then if it's a doubt, if it was there for 24 hours or not, you could be lenient. Unless if you're planning to cook it, then because you're planning to cook it, which might become biblical, so then you have to go stricter. But regardless, you still need to kasher the pot. Even if there's a doubt, you still need to kasher the pot. And therefore, you kasher the pot. Okay, now the next din over here is a continuation of this din, and this is as follows. And this is a very practical din, not only in basar v'cholav. We learned that if liquid is soaked in a container for 24 hours, it's cooked. 23 hours, 59 minutes, it's not cooked. Right? That's the din. 24 hours is cooked, 10 hours not, 15 hours not. That's only by food which is not sharp, like milk. What happens if somebody takes something sharp, vinegar, very salty water, and then you put it into a keli, you don't need 24 hours to make it a problem. Some opinions say 18 minutes. Some people say 10 minutes. Most people are lenient about the 8. So there's an opinion that says 6 minutes, but that we don't go by. But in other words, like this: if somebody has vinegar and they put in a lot of milk, so now it's very sharp. So then the pot would be considered kavush and cooked even after 18 minutes. Even after 18 minutes. I'll tell you where this is a practical coming up in Pesach. People, let's say, use romaine lettuce for mortar. And there's what's called the buck story. So people soak the romaine lettuce in water. They always tell you that you should put in salt into the water. Why? Because salt makes the bugs come out better. The problem is if you have very salty water and you leave the mortar, the romaine lettuce, in that water for more than 18 minutes, you cannot use that mortar for Pesach, for the Seder. Why? Because the din Shulchan Aruch is cooked mortar is not kosher for the mitzvah of mortar. I mean, you can eat it during Pesach, I'm saying, but for the mitzvah of mortar, the night of the Zdorim, it cannot be cooked. If somebody cooks horseradish, you can't use it. Cooked mortar is not allowed to be used for the mitzvah of mortar. So if somebody has very salty salt water, and they soak the romaine lettuce to get the bugs out, and they leave it there 20 minutes, 25 minutes, a half an hour, then you can't use the mortar for mortar because it became cooked. If it was cooked, you can't use it for the mortar. So you have to be careful with these dinim of if it's very sharp. And then it's going to be a very problematic thing. Now, if it's less than, the din, so then sometimes you need kadei klipa, you have to, it's complicated. Bottom line is, there's a lot of too many details to discuss. So then people have to make sure that if you have something sharp soaking, it could be a question of bishul after 24 hours. After 18 minutes even. You don't need 24 hours. If it's not sharp, then you need 24 hours. Otherwise, in 18 minutes it can happen. Okay, okay. Then they talk about the keli, it's not for now. Okay, now, what happens is another issue. When it's sharp, there's no inyan of 24 hours blemished already. For instance, and then we're going to learn more details because that's a really practical din. If somebody takes a meat knife that wasn't used for 24 hours, clean, not used for 24 hours, and cuts an onion or garlic or lemon or sharp foods, jalapeno peppers, whatever, it's things, sharp, not a regular pepper, but the sharp peppers, even though it wasn't used for 24 hours, that onion is meat. That onion is meat. Why? It's not used for 24 hours, it's a blemished taste. Something sharp makes the blemished unblemished. That means when you cut an onion with a meat knife, this is an onion, and you're cutting it with a meat knife, so even though the knife is clean, it wasn't used for 24 hours, by cutting the sharp onion with pressure, it makes the onion completely fleshig. That means you can't use that for a cheese sandwich. The onion that's left over, you can't use for a cheese sandwich.
Can you eat it in your locks?
Huh?
Can you eat it in your locks?
You could eat it with the lox, but not with cream cheese.
You have to wait 6 hours, right?
No, you don't have to wait 6 hours.
So how long do you need before this doesn't happen? For a knife to be sit?
Doesn't matter, it could be days.
It could be months.
It could be months, there's no difference.
Not a rat.
How about I put it in the You said you put it in the ground.
No, but
take
that's
it
not
out.
gonna. It's good. It's still gonna be a problem. If you stuck it in the ground, maybe it's then different because maybe you got rid of it. But you normally don't stick it in the ground. There's no reason they have a fleishik knife. Why should you stick it in the ground? And then I take and cut an onion. And this is very practical, by the way. That then we're gonna learn. There's a lot of detail, but that is a really very practical thing on a daily basis. People they cut an onion. They don't want to use a whole onion. Okay, so they cut half an onion. So we learned already, you can't leave an onion overnight, that's, a cut onion overnight, a peeled onion overnight, unless you leave a little bit of that, keppel it's called, whatever, the stem of it on top of it, then you could. So what many people do, they want an onion, so they cut an onion with a fleishik knife. They use now half of it for Shabbos, for fleishiks, and then they leave the thing on it, so they put it away in the refrigerator for later, for another time. But they have to remember that onion is fleishik. And if you're going to make a grilled cheese sandwich, whatever, and put onions, that fleishik onion on the cheese is going to treif it up. So people have to know, that's why b'chlal, it's proper that people have parva knives for certain things, especially sharp things, that they want to cut an onion, they want to cut this. They make sure that it's a parva knife, and then you don't have any issue with it. You can use the milk, you can use the fleishiks, whatever. But here the problem is, if you put something sharp in a something treif sharp in a pot, okay, or like very salty milk, extremely salty milk, for whatever reason, and you leave it in the pot, you have to kasher the pot, even though it wasn't there 24 hours and it's cold. The fact that it's salty, you have to kasher the pot because it became absorbed, the taste of the milk, within the walls of the fleishik pot, so it's treif.
How long does it last for?
Huh?
How long does it last for?
What?
The knife.
How long does it stay fleishik for? Until you kasher it.
Oh, you have to cut. Then you
No, I mean, if you kasher it, you kasher it, but...
So I think after a year,
No, but that's a whole discussion. Remind me tomorrow. Remind me. Some people have a heter after a year. The heter for a year that is not used is based on a chamtzvi, and the chamtzvi really speaks about chametz on Pesach and yayin stam, tray for wine. Some people apply it to everything else. Not everybody does. Like, for instance, I just mentioned it, then we'll discuss it if you remind me more tomorrow. The Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva. What happens if somebody has a very, very, very expensive china set? I'm talking about tens of thousands of dollars, not a few $100s. I mean, a really, really important set. And they got it from the grandparents and they didn't keep kosher, but it's a really, really expensive set. So the Moshe Feinstein is lenient that you can kasher it after a year, because normally China is earthenware, you can't kasher it. So after a year, you could kasher it 3 times with agola. I mean, put it in, again, out in different pots, whatever. But most people disagree with that, and it's a separate issue.
China?
Not in China, China.